Hey everyone, it's Nissa. Today we're going to be discussing the literature review. As you're writing your research paper, you're going to start to put things together. So we're going to talk a little bit today about what needs to go in your introduction, how you're going to open up your research paper, and what components you should ideally have in your lit review. So what should go into your introduction for your research paper? So can you just start like any other essay? What sorts of things do you need to keep in mind? So we're going to talk about this acronym today, CARS, which is carving a research space. So you're going to use these tools today to ideally carve out a piece of the research for yourself, is to first establish what's the general area that you're going to be discussing. Specifically, what part of that are you going to be talking about? And lastly, how is the research that you're doing important? Why does your paper need to be written? And how does it fill a void that was previously left by other scholars? So the literature review has three moves. So first, like we said, identifying a research territory. Generally, what is your topic? Second, you're going to establish a research niche, which is something specific. Specifically, what within that area are you going to be talking about? Specifically, what sorts of problems are you going to be offering solutions to? Specifically, what argumentation are you going to be offering? And lastly, you're going to occupy the research niche. You're going to show that your research fills somehow some kind of a void that has not been satisfied or answered by previous scholarship. So the work of others is primary in your lit review. Your contributions and insights are secondary. We know that because this is your paper, you're going to be offering some kind of a solution to a problem, some kind of new argumentation. So you're going to be offering something new. But your lit review is ideally the place where you want to show that you understand what's been done in your topic before. So you're not going to reinvent the wheel, so to speak. You're going to show how your research fits into the greater picture, how your research fills a void or fills a hole left by other scholarship that has talked about other areas but maybe hasn't specifically addressed your problem or your argument or your theory. So the lit review is the place for you to show how your research fits in with other scholarship, and more specifically, why your research paper is important to the conversation. What does it add to the theoretical discussion? So there are a variety of lit reviews that you could potentially be writing throughout your career and throughout your academic career more specifically. And it's going to depend on the type of paper that you're writing. For example, if you have a bachelor's project or a short paper project for your master's thesis or for your PhD, this is going to be very descriptive and very topic focused, very indicative of the major sources on a topic. It's going to be pretty short. Another kind is if you have an MA dissertation or a thesis or a longer project for your master's or for your PhD. It's ideally going to be more analytical. It's going to cover major methodological issues. It's going to talk about major research techniques, go obviously a little bit more in depth. Maybe it has two literature-based chapters, maybe one on methodological issues which demonstrate the knowledge of the advantages and disadvantages, and another on theoretical issues relevant to the topic or problem. So this is going to go obviously more in depth. You'll need to ask yourself, ideally, how long does this need to be? To what level of depth does this need to go? How much information does it need to cover? Obviously, in a shorter paper, you may not be talking about major methodological issues. You may pick on a couple, but it really isn't going to be a primary focus of your paper. But in a larger, longer paper, that may be something that you focus on. And then there's the PhD dissertation or a major thesis, where this is obviously going to be a larger, longer paper. It's going to talk about all of the research done in a particular topic, including that in other languages. Obviously, if you're doing a shorter paper, you won't have time to do this, and you're just going to talk about the major sources. But if you're doing a PhD dissertation or a major thesis, you want to include absolutely everything that's been done to illustrate that you really have taken the time to see what's been researched before and what still needs to be looked into. The PhD dissertation or a master's thesis has obviously a high level of conceptual thinking within and across theories. It's not just going to focus on one theory or one problem or one argument, but try and provide a synthesis of a variety of different theories and show how they maybe interact, how they build off of each other. Obviously much, much longer than the short paper. The project you're going to be doing for ESL 501 is this shorter paper, which is going to be very descriptive. You're going to focus on one topic. You're likely only going to cover the major or the current sources on your topic, not necessarily absolutely everything that's ever been written on your topic, because you simply don't have the space to do that. So you're going to be very focused. You're going to justify, of course, why your topic is one that needs to be discussed. you're really only gonna scratch the surface with respect to these other papers. You're not gonna go nearly as in depth as you could be, even though some of you are likely grappling with an MA dissertation or a thesis or maybe a PhD dissertation. So you should keep these in mind, that all of these other papers also have lit reviews and introductions, but the organization of the lit review should be a lesson for you in maybe how you present the work of other scholars and how it is that you position your research with respect to the work that's already been done. So the first step is you're going to identify a research space. This is the first of 3 steps. So generally, what's the area of discussion for your paper? For the current paper that you're currently writing, what is the general area? Where in the world are we starting? Of all the potential topics, narrow it down generally to an area of discussion. This is also the place where you give your reader the information they need to understand your analysis or argumentation by providing them the background information they need, definitions, descriptions. An important question here is, who is your audience and what do they need to know? If you're going to be addressing your peers within your own community, within your own academic field, obviously you don't need to go over some of the preliminary or simpler definitions used. However, if you are addressing a general audience or the general population, such as what you're doing for your ESL 501 paper, you're going to need to take a step back and say, is this really generally known, or do I need to define this? Do I need to find a very basic introductory level textbook and find out some and be able to articulate some of those very basic definitions? Because the lit review is the place where you give your reader the information they need to understand where you're going. Where are you starting with your paper, and where is it that you're going to be going? Second step, identifying a research niche. So this is what we would say is a hinge that connects step 1 to step 3. So step 1 being what has been done, what's the topic, what sorts of work has already been completed and published, to step 3, what the present research is about, what specifically is your paper about. So step 2 is you're going to establish the motivation for the study by indicating a gap in the research story so far that is still incomplete. So you're going to say, well, all of this information has been researched, all of this research has been published. There's still this area that is left unsatisfied or unanswered. There's this problem that still needs a solution. Maybe giving reasons for why it hasn't been researched before, maybe articulating that perhaps it's a difficult problem to look at. You're going to basically show how your research is something that's needed. So first, in your step 1, you're going to explain what the general topic of the research is. Step 3 is going to be talking about your research, and then you want to consider step 2 as the link between step 1 and step 3, in that there's a hole somewhere, there's a void that needs to be filled, and you're going to articulate and point out specifically how your research is going to do that. This can also function as a mini critique. By providing the previous scholarship on a topic, you can say, well, all this research has been done, no one has done this yet, or so-and-so neglected to consider this aspect of the problem. You're not going to spend obviously a lot of time dwelling on what they did or didn't do, because that's really not the purpose of your paper, but it's important for you to say, this is the void, and this is specifically the problem we have, and then in step 3 you can be able to say, well, this is my research, this is how it satisfies this void, this is how it solves this particular problem. So you can think of step 2 as a critique of what has or hasn't been done, and more specifically the link between step 1 and step 3. And finally, step 3 is when you're going to occupy that research niche. You're going to fill it. You're going to exist within that research niche. So what's the purpose of your research paper? Now you can start to get into talking about your purposes, with why specifically you're writing this paper, and why, more importantly, this paper needs to be written. So you're going to evaluate the merits of your research, and specifically stating how your research fills the void that you've identified in step 2. So earlier we talked about illustrating and defining a void that needs to be filled. Well, in step 3 you're going to explain specifically how your research is going to do that. You don't need to lay out all the results just yet, because of course you still have the rest of the paper to do that. And lastly, at the end of step 3, you're going to state your thesis, which is also going to probably be the end of your introduction, because your thesis is obviously going to be your point, the main point that you're trying to argue throughout your paper. So step 3 is going to be the place for your thesis. So keep that in mind in terms of placement.